The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Sophia Martinez adjusted her grip on the standard-issue rifle. Around her, fellow recruits whispered and snickered there, voices carrying across the shooting range like unwelcome wind. At 22, Sophia stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, her slight frame drawing skeptical glances from the towering soldiers surrounding her. "Look at tiny Sophia trying to handle a real weapon," muttered Jackson, a burly recruit from Texas whose voice boomed across the range. "Maybe she should stick to target practice with water guns." The laughter that followed felt like needles piercing her confidence, but Sophia kept her eyes focused downrange, her jaw set. With quiet determination, Sergeant Williams approached the SE firing line, his weathered face showing decades of military experience. His eyes swept across the recruits before landing on Sophia with what seemed like pity rather than expectation. "All right, rookies. Today we separate the shooters from the spectators. 500 M standard target, 5 shots each. Martinez, you're up first." The snickering intensified as Sophia stepped forward to the firing position. She could hear the whispered bets being placed behind her. How many shots she would miss, whether she could even hit the target board, if she would cry when the rifle's recoil knocked her backward. Her hands remained steady despite the trembling she felt. Inside, years of her grandfather's hunting lessons echoing in her memory. Sophia had grown up in rural Montana, where her grandfather had taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts before she was old enough for school. While other girls her age played with dolls, she was learning to read wind patterns and calculate bullet drop. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had seen something special in her steady hands and patient demeanor. "Shooting isn't about strength, Mika," he would tell her in his gentle voice. "It's about breathing, focus, and becoming one with your weapon." The memories steadied her as she settled into position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The range fell silent, except for the distant flutter of flags indicating wind direction and speed. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, filtering out the doubters behind her and connecting with the lesson her grandfather had drilled into her countless times. When she opened her eyes, the world had narrowed to just her, the rifle, and the distant target that looked impossibly small through the iron sights. Her breathing slowed to a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, each exhale bringing her closer to that perfect moment between breaths where everything becomes still. The first shot rang out across the range, followed by 4 more in steady succession. Through the spotting scope, Sergeant Williams studied the target with growing amazement. All 5 shots had found their mark within the center ring, creating a tight grouping that would make experienced snipers proud. He lowered the scope and looked at Sophia with newfound respect, though the other recruits continued their mockery, assuming she had somehow gotten lucky. "Beginner's luck," Jackson called out loudly. "Let's see her do that again." But there was something different in Sergeant Williams' expression as he made notes on his clipboard. He had seen thousands of recruits come through this range, and what he had just witnessed was not luck. It was the kind of natural precision that couldn't be taught, only refined. As the other recruits took their turns, most struggling to hit the target consistently at this distance, Sophia remained quiet and observant. She watched each shooter, noting their stance, breathing patterns, and trigger control. While they saw her as the weak link in their unit, she was already analyzing their techniques and mentally cataloging improvements that could be made. The training session ended with Sophia having posted the highest score of the day, though the achievement was dismissed by her peers as a fluke. As they walked back to the barracks, she could hear them planning ways to prove that the little girl didn't belong among real soldiers. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead to a shot that would silence every doubter and establish a legend that would be spoken about for generations to come. Weeks turned into months as Sophia endured constant harassment from her fellow soldiers. They nicknamed her Mouse because of her quiet demeanor and small stature, never imagining that she was actually studying their every weakness. During mess hall dinners, they would loudly discuss how women didn't belong in combat roles, making sure their voices carried to where she sat alone with her tray. The mockery reached new heights when Captain Rodriguez announced that their unit would be competing in the annual inter-battalion marksmanship competition. The prize was selection for advanced sniper training, an elite program that only the top 1% of marksmen ever qualified for. The competition would test shooting skills at multiple distances, culminating in an extreme long-range challenge that had stumped even seasoned veterans. "Why don't you sit this one out, Mouse?" Jackson suggested with fake concern. During the announcement, "This is for serious shooters, not someone who got lucky once." His cronies laughed and nodded in agreement, but Sophia simply looked up from cleaning her rifle and met his gaze with steady confidence. "I'll be there," she said quietly, her voice carrying a certainty that made Jackson's smirk falter slightly. There was something in her tone that suggested she knew something they didn't. A quiet confidence that came from hours of secret practice when others thought she was sleeping. Every night after lights out, Sophia would sneak out to a secluded part of the base where she had discovered an abandoned shooting position using her personal rifle that her grandfather had left her, a customized bolt action that had been in their family for decades. She practiced in darkness and dawn light. She learned to shoot in every weather condition, memorizing how wind and humidity affected bullet trajectory at different distances. Her grandfather's journals, which she kept hidden in her foot locker, contained decades of shooting wisdom and ballistic calculations. She studied them like sacred texts, learning about advanced techniques that most soldiers never encountered. The journals detailed stories of impossible shots made in Vietnam, along with detailed notes about reading environmental conditions and calculating complex trajectories. During official training exercises, Sophia continued to outperform her peers, though her achievements were consistently downplayed or attributed to luck. When she scored perfect marks on the 800-meter qualification, Sergeant Williams began to pay closer attention. He started arriving early to watch her practice, noting the methodical way she approached each shot and the almost supernatural calm that seemed to surround her. "Martine," Sergeant Williams called to her after one particularly impressive session. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" His question was genuine, tinged with the respect of someone who recognized exceptional skill when he saw it. "My grandfather taught me," Sophia replied simply, not elaborating on the countless hours of training or the advanced techniques she had absorbed from his journals. She preferred to let her shooting speak for itself, knowing that words would only give her detractors more ammunition for their mockery. As the competition date approached, the harassment intensified. Jackson and his followers began sabotaging her equipment, loosening scope mounts, and hiding her cleaning supplies. They spread rumors that she was using illegal modifications or receiving special treatment from the instructors. The psychological pressure was intended to break her confidence and force her to withdraw from the competition. But the constant attacks only strengthened Sophia's resolve. She began triple-checking her equipment and developed backup plans for every scenario. Her grandfather had taught her that a true marksman must be prepared for any situation, and she applied that wisdom to dealing with her hostile environment. She learned to trust no one but herself and her weapon. The night before the competition, Sophia sat alone in the barracks common room, methodically cleaning her rifle while the others celebrated what they assumed would be their easy victory. Through the window, she could see the competition range being set up with targets placed at distances that would challenge even the most experienced shooters. Jackson walked by with his group, stopping to loom over her table. "Last chance to back out gracefully, Mouse," he said with a cruel grin. "Tomorrow, everyone's going to see what a real joke you are." His friends laughed and made disparaging comments about her abilities and her place in the military. Sophia looked up from her rifle, her dark eyes reflecting a calm that seemed almost otherworldly. "We'll see," she said softly, returning to her cleaning with The patience of someone who knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. Her confidence wasn't based on hope or wishful thinking, but on countless hours of preparation and an inner certainty that had been building since that first day on the range. Dawn broke gray and misty over the competition range as soldiers from 5 different battalions gathered for the annual marksmanship challenge. The atmosphere was electric, with nervous energy and competitive tension. Spectators included high-ranking officers who had come to scout potential candidates for elite units, their presence adding weight to an already pressure-filled event. Sophia arrived early, carrying her grandfather's rifle in a worn leather case that had seen decades of use. The weapon looked ancient compared to the modern tactical rifles that other competitors displayed with pride. Several shooters pointed and whispered about the old-fashioned wooden stock and seemingly outdated scope, their laughter carrying across the morning air like scattered leaves. Colonel Henderson, the competition director, outlined the challenge structure to the assembled marksmen. The competition would consist of 4 stages, each more difficult than the last. Starting at 500 shooters would advance through 800 1200 and finally to the legendary 1500 challenge that had eliminated even experienced snipers in previous years. Only shooters who maintain perfect or near-perfect scores will advance to each subsequent stage, Colonel Henderson announced, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military service. The final stage will separate the exceptional from the merely good. The winner earns automatic selection for our most advanced sniper program and specialized training with equipment most soldiers never see. The first stage began with 43 competitors spread across the firing line. The 500-meter targets looked deceptively manageable in the morning light, but seasoned competitors knew that distance shooting was about far more than simply aiming and pulling the trigger. Wind conditions, temperature, humidity, and even the slight movements of the earth itself would affect bullet trajectory. Sophia took her position at lane 15, feeling the familiar comfort of her grandfather's rifle as she settled into her shooting stance. Around her, other competitors made final adjustments to their expensive optics and muttered calculations under their breath. She closed her eyes briefly, filtering out the distractions and connecting with the zen-like state that her grandfather had taught her to achieve. The command to commence firing echoed across the range, and the morning air erupted with the sharp crack of rifle shots. Sophia's breathing slowed to the rhythm she had practiced thousands of times, each exhale bringing her closer to that perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats. Her first shot felt perfect a moment. It left the barrel, the rifle's recoil familiar and comforting. When the first stage results were announced, 27 competitors had advanced to the 800-meter challenge. Sophia's perfect score surprised no one who had been paying attention to her consistent performance, but it still drew skeptical looks from those who continued to view her success as temporary luck that would eventually run out. Jackson had barely qualified for the second stage, his grouping loose and his confidence shaken by the pressure of formal competition. He glared at Sophia with unconcealed resentment, unable to accept that someone he had dismissed so completely was outperforming him so consistently. The 800-meter stage proved more challenging, with swirling winds and changing light conditions that tested even experienced marksmen. Targets that had seemed manageable from closer distances now appeared as tiny specks that demanded absolute precision and perfect technique. The margin for error had essentially disappeared, and every shot required complete focus and flawless execution. Sophia approached this stage with the same methodical calm that had characterized her shooting from the beginning. She spent extra time reading the wind flags and studying the heat shimmer that rose from the earth between her position and the target. Her grandfather's journals had prepared her for these conditions, describing similar challenges he had faced in the dense jungles of Southeast Asia. As she settled into position, Sophia noticed Colonel Henderson watching her through binoculars from the observation tower. His attention wasn't casual. Curiosity, but the focused study of someone who recognized exceptional ability when he witnessed it. Other officers had begun to gather around him, drawn by whatever they were seeing through the spotting scopes. The second stage eliminated another 15 competitors, leaving only 12 marksmen to face the 1,200-meter challenge. Among those eliminated was Jackson, whose frustration had affected his shooting technique and caused his accuracy to deteriorate under pressure. He stomped away from a firing line, his earlier confidence replaced by bitter resentment at being outclassed by someone he had spent months mocking. Sophia remained at the firing line, methodically cleaning her rifle and preparing for the next stage. The 1,200-meter challenge would test skills that most soldiers never developed, requiring an understanding of advanced ballistics and environmental factors that could only come from years of dedicated study and practice. As the remaining competitors prepared for the third stage, whispers began to spread among the spectators. Word was circulating about the quiet young woman with the ancient rifle who was shooting with precision that defied explanation. Some officers were already discussing whether she might be ready for challenges that went far beyond standard competition parameters. The stage was being set for something extraordinary, though none of the remaining competitors yet understood just how extraordinary it would prove to be. The 1,200-meter stage separated the truly skilled marksmen from those who had simply gotten lucky in earlier rounds. At this distance, targets appeared as mere dots against the landscape, and every environmental factor became magnified in its effect on bullet trajectory. The afternoon sun created heat mirages that made the targets dance and shimmer, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging shot. Only 7 competitors remained as they approached the firing line for the third stage. The atmosphere had grown noticeably quieter, with even the most confident shooters showing signs of nervousness as they studied the distant targets through their scopes. This was the distance where many experienced snipers began to struggle, where natural ability had to be combined with advanced technical knowledge and years of practice. Sophia took her position with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the competition, but those watching closely could see the heightened focus in her eyes. This was the distance where her grandfather's teachings would truly be tested, where the advanced techniques she had studied in his journals would either prove their worth or reveal their limitations. Colonel Henderson descended from the observation tower and walked behind the firing line, studying each remaining competitor with the eye of someone who understood what he was witnessing. When he paused behind Sophia's position, she could feel his presence, but remained focused on her pre-shot routine, checking wind conditions and calculating the complex ballistics required for this extreme distance. "That's an interesting rifle, soldier," Colonel Henderson said, quietly, his voice carrying respect rather than skepticism. "Looks like it has some history behind it." His comment drew curious glances from nearby competitors who had been too focused on their own equipment to pay attention to Sophia's seemingly outdated weapon. "It belonged to my grandfather," Sophia replied without taking her eye from her scope. "He used it in Vietnam." She made final adjustments to her position, feeling the familiar connection between herself and the rifle that had been built through countless hours of practice and an almost mystical understanding of the weapon's capabilities. The command to commence firing cut through the afternoon air like a blade. The remaining competitors settled into their shooting positions, each one knowing that this stage would likely determine who would advance to the legendary final challenge that had become the stuff of military legend. Sophia's first shot at 1,200 meters felt different from anything she had experienced before. The bullet seemed to hang in the air longer, affected by wind currents and atmospheric conditions that required calculations she had only practiced in theory. But when the shot impacted, creating a perfect hole in the center of her target, she knew that all her preparation had been worthwhile. The third stage eliminated 4 more competitors, leaving only 3 marksmen to face the final challenge. The elimination of so many skilled shooters sent ripples of amazement through the spectator area, with officers beginning to discuss the exceptional level of shooting they were witnessing. Some began making phone calls to superiors, reporting that they might have found something special. As the eliminated competitors gathered their equipment and departed, Sophia noticed the changed atmosphere around the range. What had begun as a routine competition had evolved into something much more significant. The remaining spectators included some of the military's most senior marksmanship instructors, all drawn by reports of shooting that exceeded normal competition standards. The final stage was announced with unusual ceremony. Colonel Henderson personally addressed the 3 remaining competitors, explaining that they would be attempting something that had only been accomplished a handful of times in the competition's history. The target would be placed at 1,500 m, a distance that tested the absolute limits of both equipment and human ability. At this distance, Colonel Henderson explained, you're shooting beyond the effective range of most military rifles. You'll be dealing with bullet drop measured in feet rather than inches, and wind drift that can move your shot completely off target. This is where we separate the exceptional from the merely excellent. Sophia's 2 remaining competitors were both seasoned snipers with years of experience and reputations built on consistent performance under pressure. Staff Sergeant Williams, no relation to her training sergeant, was a decorated veteran with multiple combat deployments. Master Sergeant Chen had set several military marksmanship records and was considered one of the finest precision shooters in the entire armed forces. Both men looked at Sophia with mixtures of curiosity and concern, unable to understand how someone so young and seemingly inexperienced had managed to keep pace with them through the increasingly difficult stages. Her ancient rifle looked primitive compared to their state-of-the-art precision weapons, yet somehow she had matched their performance shot for shot. The 1,500-meter target was barely visible even through high-powered scopes, appearing as little more than a speck on the distant hillside. This was a shot that required not just technical skill, but an almost supernatural understanding of ballistics and environmental conditions. It was the kind of challenge that revealed whether a marksman possessed that indefinable quality that separated the legendary from the merely skilled. As Sophia studied the target through her grandfather's scope, she felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her. Everything in her life had been leading to this moment, from her first lessons with tin cans on fence, posts to the countless hours of secret practice she had endured while others mocked her abilities. The stage was set for a demonstration that would silence every doubter and establish her place among the elite marksmen of military history. The wind had picked up as afternoon shadows lengthened across the competition range, creating variable conditions that would challenge even the most experienced marksman. At 1,500 m, the slightest breeze could push a bullet several feet off course, turning a perfect shot into a complete miss. The 3 remaining competitors spent long minutes studying wind flags and vegetation movement, trying to read patterns in the constantly shifting air currents. Sophia closed her eyes and felt the wind against her face, using techniques her grandfather had taught her that went beyond simple observation. She could feel the subtle pressure changes that indicated wind shifts and the temperature variations that would affect bullet trajectory. These were skills that couldn't be learned from manuals or taught in classrooms, but had to be developed through years of patient practice and almost mystical connection with the environment. Staff Sergeant Williams took the first shot in the final stage, his expensive precision rifle equipped with the latest in ballistic computers and environmental sensors. The shot was technically perfect according to all calculations, but the bullet struck just outside the scoring ring due to a wind shift that occurred during the bullet's flight time. His face showed the frustration of someone who had done everything right, but had been defeated by factors beyond his control. Master Sergeant Chen approached his shot with methodical precision that reflected years of professional sniper training. He spent several minutes making man adjustments to his scope and calculating environmental factors with mathematical precision. His shot was closer than Williams, striking within the outer scoring ring, but still not achieving the center impact that the final stage demanded for victory. As Sophia prepared for her shot, a strange calm settled over the range. Spectators who had been chatting quietly fell silent, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Colonel Henderson watched through high-powered binoculars, his years of experience telling him that this young soldier possessed something that couldn't be taught or explained by conventional military doctrine. Sophia settled into her shooting position with the fluid grace of someone who had performed this routine thousands of times. Her grandfather's rifle felt like an extension of her body, every component familiar and perfectly balanced for her frame and shooting style. The aged wooden stock had been shaped by decades of use, molding itself to fit her grip with perfect precision. Through her scope, the 1,500-meter target looked impossibly small and distant. At this range, she wasn't just shooting a target, but challenging the very limits of what was possible with rifle marksmanship. The bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach its destination, traveling through constantly changing environmental conditions that could affect its path in countless ways. But as Sophia studied the target, something remarkable happened. The world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only her, the rifle, in the distant speck of the target, connected by an invisible line that only she could see. Her breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, and time itself seemed to stretch as she entered the zone of perfect focus that her grandfather had described in his journals. The mathematics of the shot were complex beyond normal calculation. Bullet drop at 1,500 m would be measured in feet, requiring her to aim well above the target to compensate for gravity's effect. Wind drift could push the bullet yards off course, requiring precise reading of conditions along the entire flight path. Temperature and humidity would affect both the bullet's ballistic coefficient and the air density through which it traveled. But Sophia didn't rely on calculations alone. Instead, she drew upon something deeper and more intuitive, a connection with her weapon, an environment that transcended technical knowledge. Her grandfather had called it becoming one with the shot. A state where conscious thought gave way to instinctive understanding of all the factors affecting bullet trajectory. As she took up trigger slack, Sophia felt the perfect stillness that comes between heartbeats and breaths. That moment when everything in the universe aligns for a perfect shot. Her finger applied steady rearward pressure to the trigger, and the rifle fired with a crisp break that sent the bullet arcing toward its distant target. The shot seemed to hang in the air forever, traveling through space and time while spectators held their breath in anticipation. Through her scope, Sophia tracked the bullet's path, watching as it disappeared into the distance, carrying with it months of preparation and a lifetime of dreams. When the spotter called out, "Sent a hit," the range erupted in amazed cheering, but Sophia barely heard the celebration. She remained in position, still focused on the target, hardly believing that she had just accomplished something that military marksmen would talk about for generations. The impossible shot at 1,500 m had found its mark with precision that defied explanation. Colonel Henderson was the first to reach her position, his face showing the awe of someone who had witnessed something truly extraordinary. "Soldier," he said quietly, "I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Where did you learn to make shots that most snipers can only dream about?" But even as accolades and congratulations surrounded her, Sophia knew that this was only the beginning. Word of her achievement would spread quickly through military channels, and soon she would face challenges that would make this competition seem like basic training. The shot that had silenced her doubters had also announced her arrival as a marksman whose abilities transcended normal human limits. Word of Sophia's extraordinary performance spread through military channels faster than wildfire in dry grass. Within hours of the competition's conclusion, phone calls were being made to Pentagon offices and elite special operations commands. Video footage of her impossible 1,500-meter shot was being analyzed by ballistics experts who struggled to explain how Such precision was achievable under those conditions. 3 months later, Sophia found herself at a classified facility where the military's most advanced sniper training took place. She had been fast-tracked through selection processes that normally took years, her competition performance serving as credentials that opened doors most soldiers never knew existed. The facility housed equipment and technology that pushed the boundaries of long-range precision shooting. Her new instructor was Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a legendary sniper whose confirmed kills in multiple theaters of war had earned him near mythical status among Special Operations Forces. He studied Sophia with the calculating gaze of someone who had seen exceptional shooters before, but had never encountered anyone quite like her. "I've read your file, Martinez," Rodriguez said, as he led her to the advanced training range. "That 1,500-meter shot got a lot of people's attention, but competition shooting is different from combat. Out here, targets shoot back, conditions change constantly, and you get one chance to make shots that determine whether your teammates go home alive." The training that followed was unlike anything Sophia had experienced before. She learned to engage multiple targets at extreme ranges while under simulated enemy fire. She mastered the Barrett MRAD, a precision rifle system that represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship technology. The weapon's advanced features and superior ballistic performance made her grandfather's rifle seem like a museum piece, though she kept it with her as a reminder of her roots. Weeks passed in intensive training that pushed Sophia beyond limits she hadn't known existed. She learned urban sniper tactics, wilderness concealment techniques, and advanced ballistic calculations that accounted for factors most marksmen never considered. Her instructors were amazed by her ability to absorb complex concepts and translate them immediately into practical application. The ultimate test came on a gray morning, when Rodriguez announced that Sophia would attempt a shot that had never been successfully made in training. A target had been placed at 3,000 m, a distance so extreme that it challenged the fundamental limits of rifle accuracy and human ability. At this range, the bullet would be in flight for over 4 seconds, traveling through multiple wind zones and atmospheric layers that could affect its trajectory in unpredictable ways. "This isn't about passing a test," Rodriguez explained as they approached the firing position. "This is about discovering whether you possess capabilities that go beyond normal human limits. The military needs snipers who can make impossible shots in impossible situations. If you can engage targets at 3,000 m, you'll be operating in territory that only a handful of people in human history have ever reached." The Barrett MRAD felt different in Sophia's hands as she prepared for the ultimate challenge. The rifle's advanced optics and precision engineering represented decades of technological development, yet success would still depend on her ability to read conditions and execute technique with flawless precision. At 3,000 m, no amount of technology could compensate for human error. Through the powerful scope, the target was barely visible, even at maximum magnification. Environmental conditions were challenging with variable winds and shifting light that created constantly changing shooting parameters. The mathematics of the shot were staggering. Bullet drop would exceed 30 feet, requiring Sophia to aim at a point in empty sky far above the actual target. But as Sophia settled into position, the same supernatural calm that had characterized her competition shooting descended over her. The noise of the training facility faded away, leaving only the essential elements of marksmanship. Shooter, weapon, and target connected across an impossible distance by skill and determination that transcended normal human capability. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm that had become as natural as her heartbeat. Wind flags along the range told a complex story of air movement that she read like a familiar language. Temperature and humidity readings from multiple weather stations provided data that she processed instinctively rather than through conscious calculation. The trigger broke with mechanical precision, sending the bullet on its long journey through space and time. For over 4 seconds, The projectile flew through constantly changing conditions, its path affected by factors that most people never consider, but that snipers must master to achieve the impossible. When the spotter's voice crackled over the radio with center hit, the training facility fell into stunned silence. Rodriguez lowered his binoculars with the expression of someone who had just witnessed something that challenged his understanding of what was possible. At 3000 m, Sophia had achieved precision that redefined the limits of human marksmanship capability. The shot that had begun as a training exercise became the foundation of a legend. News of the achievement spread through special operations communities worldwide, establishing Sophia as the sniper queen, whose abilities existed in a category beyond conventional military marksmanship. Requests began arriving from elite units, facing challenges that required precision shooting at distances previously considered impossible. Jackson and the others who had mocked her during basic training would eventually hear stories of the legendary sniper whose 3,000-meter shots had become the stuff of military folklore. They would realize that the quiet young woman they had dismissed as weak had possessed capabilities that none of them could have imagined, and that their mockery had only strengthened the resolve of someone destined for greatness beyond their comprehension.